Hey there, silly geese quackers. What did you bring us this week? Yeah, it's interesting how widespread that take is. I mean, I get it. Foxface is portrayed as a really clever girl,
She's certainly figured it out, hasn't she?
a survivor. Then she dies by accident from a handful of berries?
Never even knew she was following me.
Seems suspicious. And when you're bombarded with the idea that the best and brightest are the ones that survive, accepting that Foxface just made a mistake is sort of a tough pill to swallow. So today we're going to get into this theory, look into why it might not actually work, and more importantly, why we find it so compelling, and what it reveals about who we think deserves to survive, or at least deserves to choose to die. The origin. I really think that this all comes down to a line from the novel. My guess is, if they had given us some sort of test, she would have been the smartest of all the tributes. I think that the filmmakers were trying to bring this point home when they decided to show Foxface taking a test. It's a quick and simple visual way to show us how clever Foxface is. But here's the trouble. This indicates that Foxface is good at identifying edible plants, which is odd considering she's from District 5, the Power District, which I don't believe is known for its plants or wildlife really at all. And then she dies from eating some of the berries that PETA was collecting. And because we'd already seen her able to identify edible plants, some people interpreted this sequence of events as her choosing to take herself out of the games. This theory only works for the films. We never see any indication that Foxface is able to recognize any sort of plants. More than that, we consistently see Foxface stealing food from others throughout the 74th games. She sneaks into the career's stash, Foxface creeping out onto the plane. When she decides it's safe, she runs for the pyramid with quick, small steps. I'm right about the booby trap, but it's clearly more complex than I had imagined. I was right about the girl too. How wily is she to have discovered this path into the food and to be able to replicate it so neatly? She fills her pack, taking a few items from a variety of containers. Crackers from a crate, a handful of apples from a burlap sack that hangs suspended from a rope off of the side of a bin, but only a handful of each. Not enough to tip off that the food is missing. Not enough to cause suspicion. Then Foxface steals from Katniss and PETA. When PETA doesn't answer Katniss's signal, she panics and goes looking for him, only to find him still collecting berries. While she's fussing at him for not answering the signal because it reminded her of the situation with Rue, she notices that a chunk of cheese is missing and blames him for that. Then we hear the cannon that announces Foxface's death. It takes a while to explain the situation to PETA. How she tried to take enough to stay alive, but not enough that anyone would notice it. How she wouldn't question the safety of berries we were preparing to eat ourselves. Let's be real, this strategy would be entirely unnecessary if she could in fact feed herself. Don't believe me? Let's take a look at the three characters we do know can feed themselves. Katniss, Rue, and Thresh. They all go off on their own to find food. Thresh goes off into the plane, which is widely considered his domain. She recognizes that these fields are probably quite similar to what he's used to in District 11 and jokes about there being a bread bush out there. Maybe that's why Thresh looks better fed now than he did when we started the games. Either that or he's got very generous sponsors, says PETA. We know that Rue is capable of foraging for her own food because when she and Katniss become allies, she has things to bring to the table too. And we all know that Katniss hunts and fishes and forages and does all the things. So we do see how people who are able to get food on their own behave. They don't go following around stronger tributes to take a little bit of their food as they go along. They might coordinate an attack to blow up the food and level the playing field, but that's a different thing entirely. Then there's the issue of Foxface's body. Katniss describes her like this: "What's left of Foxface's emaciated body is lifted into the air." Emaciated is how we describe bodies that have withered away due to illness or starvation. I've always understood that line to mean that Foxface was clearly starving. And if you've ever been starving, you would know that it severely messes with how your brain functions, but that's a story for another time, I guess. I do want to point out that while Foxface is described as emaciated, when Katniss and Peeta are collected from the arena after their games, she describes her own cheeks as being hollowed, so that's not conclusive in and of itself, which brings us to the last point of contention for this theory. Why? If Foxface were going to eliminate herself from these games, why wait until she's already starving? Why steal poisonous berries from an opponent? Why not find poisonous berries or a poisonous plant early in the games and preemptively end your suffering? Wouldn't that have made more of a statement? When you begin to question this theory through the reality presented in these books, it starts to fall apart. But here on Web Files, we're not just here to take down takes. We're here to consider what those takes say about us, why it matters. So why, when we have so much evidence against Foxface intentionally taking herself out, do we still see some fans and creators discussing this theory as practically canon? Sure, there's the obvious answer. The movie chose to add the edible plants test. But isn't it interesting that we didn't just assume that was a continuity error? That we instead chose to interpret it as Foxface taking agency? I really just want us to take a minute to consider how our own investment in the idea of a meritocracy plays into this. Definition break. Meritocracy. Narrowly speaking, a meritocracy is a system ruled by the best qualified, the most skilled, intelligent, or otherwise worthy. More broadly, meritocracy refers to a system where those who possess talent and hard work advance to the top. Many of us were raised to believe that we live in meritocracies. We were taught to believe that if you are smart enough or talented enough and you work hard, you can build a life for yourself. You can survive, thrive even. And it's a comforting story. It allows us to feel like we have control and agency in a world where we often don't. Foxface, who Katniss repeatedly describes as clever and wily, is the embodiment of our best and brightest. Yet, despite her brilliance, she still dies on accident from some berries. It's too simple, too anticlimactic. So, people rewrote her ending. And through this theory, we have a brilliant girl who finds a way to defy the Capitol. Not bad. Let's get back to the take. Foxface killed herself. That's a foul from me. I'd say we have plenty of evidence against it. One of the major through lines that we see in this series is that death in war is senseless. It's not heroic or glorious, no matter how beautiful, innocent, prepared, or bright you are.
Following me.
The state, or in this case, the Capitol, will consume you. Trying to restore agency to a favorite like Foxface feels good, but it also erases the commentary provided by Suzanne Collins on war. I think that we should be a little more mindful of how the theories that we perpetuate actually minimize the commentary that is being offered. But what do I know? I'm just a silly goose. Quackers?